Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Criminal Justice Inspection Unpacked, the podcast of Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland. I'm Melanie McVeigh, and today I am joined by two guests, CJI Chief Inspector Jacqui Durkin and James Corrigan, who holds the dual roles of Deputy Chief Inspector and Chief Executive with CJI. And we're here to talk about something very important: CJI's plans for the next 3 years and how Jacqui and James see these plans contributing to the effectiveness of the criminal justice system here in Northern Ireland. You're both very welcome. Your new corporate plan has been published and the plans for 2023 to 2026 are now known. Jacqui, can I perhaps start with you? What is CJI's role?
Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland was an organisation and is an organisation that was established after the Criminal Justice Review in Northern Ireland, and it was really about building public confidence in the criminal justice system. So at that time there were lots of changes to the criminal justice system in terms of creating the Police Service of Northern Ireland, an independent public prosecution service, and reform to the Northern Ireland Prison Service. And Criminal Justice Inspection was established as a joint inspectorate that covers all aspects of the criminal justice system. And importantly, we're independent of all those organisations and conduct evidence-based reviews, either thematics across the whole of the criminal justice system, or we can inspect individual organisations.
Obviously, with that important role, it's imperative that you have some clear plans in place to ensure that you are able to carry out your business. Can you tell me, what is it that you do to actually put those plans in place? How do you decide what CJI wants to do? Do you start with a blank sheet of paper, or is it James perhaps who starts with a blank sheet of paper?
Well, we don't start with a blank sheet of paper. We have a strategic plan, which is a 3-year plan called our corporate plan, and we have an annual business plan. And the foundation for that corporate plan and business plan is actually our vision, because our vision is about a justice system for all. And as Jacqui said, independence is a critical element in terms of delivering on that vision, but also we regard collaboration with other criminal justice organisations and obviously with other inspectorates and with partner bodies, because we believe that type of partnership is crucial to delivering our value. And that's enshrined in our 3-year corporate plan. We also believe that essentially we need to set a program which is a risk-based program, inspections which actually are focused on the difficulties and issues that are facing the criminal justice system. And that's we do it obviously every year, and we review it every year. But I think that's very important in terms of delivering our value. We are a very small organisation. We've only got 11 staff. Our budget is just over 1.1 million. It has been reduced over the last 4 years. So there's a challenge in that context to deliver on that vision. And obviously, as part of that, it's important that we work in partnership with other organisations to be able to deliver on that vision.
Okay, Jacqui, what about the values of the organisation? Could you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I think before we get to talk about the values, I think I'd like to add to what James said there about why corporate plans and business plans are important. So obviously, as the custodians of public money, we're required to have a corporate plan and business plan and to produce annual report and accounts about what we've actually done with that money. And that's really important. But just as important is having a window on the world or to outside organisations and individuals and the public who might be interested in what exactly we are doing as an organisation and how we're developing and growing as an organisation. So the inspection programme is part of our corporate plan and business plan, but it's also important that we demonstrate what we're doing in terms of coverage for inspections across the criminal justice system in Northern Ireland. Moving on to our visions, yes, absolutely. As an independent inspectorate, our values are really important. I'm sorry, I said visions there instead of values. What I meant was our organisational values. So for me personally, and for every individual member of staff, the values of our organisation are about how we do things. The corporate plan and the business plan say what we're going to do, but the values are very much about behaviours and attitudes and how we conduct ourselves as members of criminal justice inspection. And certainly for inspectors out on site, there are front shop, if you like, with inspected organisations and individuals and stakeholders. So it's important that everyone's very clear about what our values are as an organisation and demonstrate them in how they practice as inspectors day and daily.
So for you and for James, it's very much not about just words on a page, but living that those values and ensuring they're part of the professional operation of the organisation at all stages.
Completely. I mean, you can put any amount of shiny posters on a wall and you can put lovely diagrams in a document, but ultimately it is about people, and it's about how people behave, and it's about their professional practice on a day-to-day basis, and that's hugely important to both James and I.
Do you find it's even more important whenever you're actually going out and looking at other organisations, maybe looking at how they conduct their business, how they behave in a day-to-day fashion?
Yes, that's a very important point, because I think we have to be able to practice what we preach. And we have set 7 values, and we have reviewed those values collectively as an organisation this year. And if I was to pick out one, and of course they're all important, but if I was to pick out one value which we've placed a strong emphasis on in this year's programme, it's compassion, because it's very important that we provide advice to for those who use the criminal justice system, but also those who work within the criminal justice system. And we recognise that most people who are users of the system are not there by choice. They are victims of crime, they are witnesses to crime, they are offenders who, for various reasons, have become part of the system and are going through a very long and delayed system. So it's important that we present that voice in our reports, and that value of compassion is a critical element in terms of how we go about doing our work, because ultimately our values are around achieving better outcomes, and users of the system require and need better outcomes, and those that work within the system require a more efficient, effective system, especially now as budgets have decreased and everybody's expected to do more with less. So we believe that those values help us to deliver better inspections.
So Jacqui, what about the plans for the next 3 years? What are the objectives for CJI, and what will you be focusing on to achieve those?
Well, we have key themes for the inspection programme over the next 3 years, and they're related to better services and delivery, better efficiency and effectiveness, better protection and safeguarding, better strategy and governance, and better outcomes. And we also have a number of strategic objectives that are incorporated within the corporate plan, and they're about effectively delivering the risk-based, responsive and relevant inspection programme on an annual basis, focusing on better outcomes through the implementation of recommendations. That's also, as James mentioned, an important part is being an effective member of the National Preventive Mechanism and inspecting in places of detention. It's really important that part of our programme covers places of detention to give that assurance and that contribution as a member of NPM. Other strategic objectives relate to promoting performance improvement and collaboration with the criminal justice system and with other partner inspectorates and our partner inspectorates, whether that's RQI, ETI, or His Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons or Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services. They're really important partners in delivering our programme on an annual basis. We're also developing and implementing a new communication strategy, and this podcast is part of that, and about valuing and investing in our professional connections and well-being of our staff team. So those are our strategic objectives for the next corporate plan period.
Maybe we can talk about what are you going to be focusing on in the next year, and the inspection topics that you're going to be looking at. What's on your programme and how have you got to that point?
Well, we develop an inspection programme every year, and generally speaking, we would have around maybe 6 to 10 new inspections or follow-up reviews each year. And obviously we also have a number of inspections which are still in progress, and obviously they become a critical part of the current inspection program in terms of making sure those inspections are completed and those reports are published. But it was and essentially also we try and categorize our new inspections under I suppose categories, which is around better services, better efficiency and effectiveness, better protection and safeguarding, better strategy and governance, better outcomes. So those are the categories that we put our new inspections under. So and we try to have at least one inspection under each of those categories each year. So if I was to pick out maybe a couple, and Jacqui would probably focus on another of new inspections, but there's one under efficiency and effectiveness. We're going to look at non-PSNI investigation cases. In other words,
cases not progressed or looked at by the police.
That's right. Because there actually are quite a number of cases which are progressed, investigated by government departments. And that would include, for example, social security fraud. They would include environmental crime. We've looked at environmental crime in the past as a separate inspection. But this time around, we want to look at a more thematic inspection, looking at all the cases which are investigated and progressed by the government departments, and look for lessons across the organisations and outcomes, I suppose, because we know from previous work that there can be quite significant variations in how those cases are progressed and the type of outcomes that are delivered. Another inspection that I would like maybe to focus on in a minute is some follow-up reviews, because follow-up reviews are a key part of our methodology, because that's when we go back into an organisation and assess the level of progress against previous recommendations. So we have 2 follow-up reviews proposed for this year, one looking at governance within the probation, and another one looking at progress against recommendations made around police custody. So we're doing both of those reviews this year. I would add that police custody actually is part of a wider inspections that we do around detention facilities, because we are a member of the National Preventative Mechanism, and we have responsibilities under the NPM to look at all places of detention within the criminal justice system. And police custody, as you know, is one area. We also look at court custody, and we look obviously at all the prison inspections. So that's just an idea or a sample of some of the inspections we'll be doing this year.
Okay, Jacqui, turning to you, James has mentioned there are a number of organisations and pieces of work that are planned. Do the organisations know that they're going to be inspected, or how do you come to the decision about where your focus will be in the 12 months to come?
So obviously there's a number of inspections and reviews that are underway at the end of any financial year, so they're carried forward into the next financial year, and yes, they're added to by a number of new inspections. So every year, throughout the year, I would have contact with the leaders of each criminal justice organisation, but at a particular point in the year, usually around October, November, I would specifically engage with a number of stakeholders. That includes the heads of the criminal justice organisations in our statutory remit, but also voluntary and community sector organisations, politicians who have a particular interest in justice issues, and legal profession. So a number of people that I would meet with, some would request specifically to meet me to talk about an issue for them that they've identified in the criminal justice system, and then gathering all that information together, as well as our own internal consultation about things that inspectors have picked up on previous inspections that they've been involved in, and saying, well, really, we identified this aspect and during an inspection, and it might be worthwhile including in a future programme. So when you take all that information together, and I consider that, but ultimately the design of the programme, the inspection programme, is down to me, and I want it to reflect coverage of the criminal justice system, but also to pick up on some of those burning and key issues that stakeholders are concerned about in the criminal justice system.
Do you ever find that you're asked, please don't, can we put that off for another year? Don't touch that. Can you not maybe look at another organisation?
Absolutely. I mean, there are organisations who will volunteer other criminal justice organisations for inspection. and they'll sometimes there will be an issue over timing. So I have to consider that in the programme. We have some unannounced inspections, but by and large, if there's a particular issue in an organisation, especially where we're working with other inspectorates who we have to carefully choreograph when they're available and when the inspection teams are available. So if we don't have to do an unannounced inspection, what we would do is try and coordinate that and bear in mind some of the key issues that are happening in a particular criminal justice organisation before we would undertake that review. But ultimately, yes, some organisations are more welcoming of inspection activity than others. I think it's important to say too, even though we have an inspection programme, sometimes during the year you would get a request for review if we had a minister from a Minister of Justice or potentially the Permanent Secretary in the absence of a minister to ask us to do something additional in the programme, which can move things around and mean that we have to pause an inspection or defer an inspection to undertake an urgent piece of work.
Right. So in terms of you're looking at everybody else and you're also looking at the actions that they have taken in response to your material and the findings of the inspection. What about yourselves? How do you ensure that the objectives and the targets, the tasks that you've set for your own organisation and your staff, how do you ensure that those actions are done when you come back to look at them at the end of 12 months? What about your own objectives and targets for the year?
Well, as James said, we don't leave it till, we're a very small organisation, which means we're in practically daily contact with each other. But we do have formal monitoring mechanisms for progress of inspections. We publicly state in our terms of reference what we intend the timescale for an inspection to be. Sometimes there are things that disrupt that, which means we can't keep to that timescale, and we need to explain that to the inspected organisations. But we have internal processes and controls in place that mean that we monitor informally and formally with lead inspectors and the whole inspection team how things are progressing in an inspection. If we need to, we will modify timescales for inspections, but we also have a risk and audit committee who will take an interest in the progress of the inspection programme. We have monthly meetings with inspectors, and we also have regular team meetings where progress of the inspection programme is discussed. But ultimately, it's the value of having a small organisation is that you can have that almost instantaneous contact and discuss issues as they arrive. You don't have to wait to a formal meeting to do that.
What about, maybe I can ask you both individually about your hopes for CJI. Jacqui, this is your second corporate plan. What's key for you?
Well, what's key for me is that I'm always mindful that I'm not here for forever, that there will be another chief inspector, and therefore I want to make sure that while I'm here that CJI grows as an organisation, that develops its contacts with other inspectorates, that is reflective of what is happening currently in the criminal justice system and is adding value. Those are massively important things for me, and I'm also mindful that CJI is 20 years old this year, so we're nearly coming of age and being 21. So for me, it's important about building on what's gone before and making sure that CJI is a relevant, credible organisation in Northern Ireland. And I think we are that.
And James, what about you? What would you want to see on the CJI report card in April 2026?
I suppose I want CJI, as Jacqui said, to be seen as relevant, but also as enabling change, because ultimately our purpose is to help to achieve our stated outcomes, and it's important that all the work we do is focused on those outcomes. Obviously, in terms of independence, impartiality, excellence, those are all our core values. But when you get down to the day-to-day operation, it's really about evidence-based findings. It's about the robustness of how we gather our evidence. It's been about able to benchmark the performance of the criminal justice system against other jurisdictions. It's about making that right balance between strategic and operational recommendations, with a focus realistically on the strategic operations, because that's the ones about delivering those more transformational outcomes that everybody's trying to achieve. And it's also about building in innovation and best practice. And it's about not just necessarily looking at what doesn't work, but also actually what works well in Northern Ireland. And some areas we have been really successful, because as Jacqui said, we're around now for 20 years, this organisation. And in that 20 years, there has been some really transformational changes within the criminal justice system. And I believe CJI has been part of enabling those changes. So it's important that inspection reports reflect and promote that type of best practice.
I think, as James said, I mean, that it's really important that our role is seen as assurance as well as improvement. So it's about making sure that where there is good practice and there has been improvements and change, that organisations and the people who work in those organisations are recognised in a meaningful way to say, yes, the public who are users of the criminal justice system, whether you're a victim, witness, defendant, legal practitioner, or someone who works in a criminal justice system organisation, that you feel that there has been a professional approach to an inspection and that there's assurance in that inspection report about how things are going. But absolutely, we are focused on improving. That's not telling organisations what to do, but making recommendations, and invariably they are accepted, about making sure that it's not just words on a page, they actually take action on foot of those recommendations to make the improvements that are needed.
And I would just maybe add that in terms of accountability and transparency and essentially presenting our findings and messages, that our communication strategy is critical to helping us achieve that. And we recognise that communications is always changing, and social media has become a much more important part of communications in recent years. And we want CJI to be at the forefront of using these new techniques and new technology and new means of communication to engage with all parts of our communities, because we recognise that people get their news and the messages from lots of different sources these days. So it is important for us to be proactive in terms of reflecting that.
Well, thank you, Jacqui and James, for joining us today and sharing your insights about how CJI will be making an impact in the next 3 years. I hope this conversation has given you a better insight into the organisation's plans and a bit of a behind-the-scenes look at what has driven those priorities and what CJI will be doing to achieve a better justice system for all. If you'd like more detail about the corporate plan, which includes the current business plan and the inspection programme for the incoming year, it is available from our website. That's www.cjini.org. I look forward to joining you again soon for another episode of Criminal Justice Inspection Unpacked.